Okay, well, welcome and good morning. Happy International Women's Day. My name is Gloria Bettis, and I'm the president and CEO of the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. And we're gathered here to celebrate International Women's Day with an all-star panel of wonderful, wise women who are leading essential work of healing in our Minnesota communities. As we gather today, please join me in honoring the sacred lands on which we live, learn, and work. Minnesota includes the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of 11 sovereign nations of the Dakota and Anishinaabe. We honor all other Indigenous people of this territory and tribes that were never formally recognized by the federal government. Let's take a moment to honor and respect those who came before us, those who are among us, and those who are yet to come. I am energized by today's conversation with our guests. I want to connect the work of the foundation with the work that is led by these folks, with global movements for liberation, women and girls, and the power we hold to transform our world for equity and justice here in Minnesota, in the United States, and across the world. Before we dig into our conversation, I want to thank Westminster Presbyterian Church for generously hosting this conversation and to feel the connectedness that comes from being here in this space together. I can say I am awestruck by this powerful group of brilliant women. I know we share a conviction that equity isn't just nice to have, but it's a must have. And equity is at the core of the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, which we have been the first women's foundation across the country. Through our research and listening, we have seen how our health and well-being, our access to rest and support is essential for our ability to thrive. As a culture, we are moving beyond narrow definitions of health to understand that mental health is physical health. Through conversations with women and girls around the state, we know that the trauma and pain we inherit and experience must be addressed if we are to truly be well. I'd like to briefly introduce our panelists, these amazing leaders that we know who know the work intimately, and I'm excited to hear their wisdom, their vision, and their solutions. So to my far right, we have Elder Amoke, a Northside healer and artist of Yo Mama's House, an art-based support group that empowers mothers and showcases the art of mothering.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. We are, to her left is Suzanne Keplinger, a philanthropic leader in healing justice and the founder of Catalyst North Consulting. Suzanne is also formerly the co-creator and leader of Catalyst Initiative of the George Family Foundation, and she served for 10 years as the executive director of the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center. Thanks. Johi Pomplin, a body worker and executive director of the Alliance, a coalition of community-based organizations and advocacy groups building shared power to advance strategic campaigns around the intersection of racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, and health equity in the Twin Cities region. And Rebecca Endozi, a holistic healing practitioner, a teacher of child, adult, and family yoga and meditation, and a certified community coach in healing justice. So through today's Rise and Thrive Roundtable, we want to dive into what it takes to resource rest and radical care. We want to talk about why rest is necessary and what it means when we're talking about healing. At the Women's Foundation, we are investing in holistic well-being and reproductive justice so that women and girls and gender expansive people are well in every area of their being, with maternal and infant health, reproductive justice, and healing. From the uprisings to pandemics to our reproductive rights, we have seen how wellness and healing are critical to sustain movements. Women, girls, and gender expansive people have long been at the forefront of these movements, leading the way with grit and with joy, yet investing in their rest and well-being has been minimal. Because we are investing at the Women's Foundation in transformational change, For women, girls, and gender expansive people, we are interested in solutions that get to the root of systemic issues that break down barriers and address the root causes of harm and disparities. When I speak with leaders of nonprofits whose demanding work directly supports people who are pushed to the margins, I hear about, and I know about, the exhaustion and deep fatigue that comes with working on the front lines. I think of the words of Tricia Hershey, founder of the NAP Ministry, who has said, "You are exhausted physically and spiritually because the pace created by the system is for machines. It is not magical. It is not made for magical, divine human beings." I am with some magical, divine human beings, just like all of you. So this year, the Women's Foundation is celebrating its 40th anniversary, and we will be making 40 grants to support the wellness and healing of BIPOC Minnesota leaders. And today we want to explore the importance of supporting and sustaining movements in healing justice and how we can center joy and healing in leadership. So there is tremendous power when we are whole, when we are well, and when we are rested. And of course, when we have joy. So with that, I want to turn to the panel and ask my first question. When you hear the word joy, what does it mean to you? And what does joy look and feel like? Elder Amoke, would you like to start?
Yes, joy. Joy is that pinnacle of happiness. It generally happens surprisingly. It's a pop of energy. Your body tingles, you want to giggle, your body responds, your heart beats. It's that feeling of just immense happiness that we don't get a chance to see a lot of times. I remember the word joy and being linked with pain, like May's joy and pain, sunshine and rain. And that was the way of kind of gauging where I was at, but that's a big gap. That's a big extreme. So when I think of joy, I think of what makes us get to that bubbling, tingly, happy feeling. And I also think about how do we sustain that, because it is so very, very, very necessary to our well-being.
Yeah, thank you so much. What do others think about that? Does that resonate with you?
I think joy can be very quiet. It can be elation and the bubbling, tingling, but I think it can also be very quiet moments, and we often don't recognize it as joy. It's a thing that comes over us, but we may be not connecting with our capacity to be joyful because we're so busy doing the work, right?
Yeah, go ahead. We knew we were going to do this, didn't we? I agree. I really resonate with what both of you said. I feel like joy, the word can constrain the experience. So we have this idea that maybe it's something that's out there or that looks a particular way. But I experience joy as something where I feel completely at ease with myself, and I am open to the present moment, and I can actually have joy in that feeling. I can have joy wherever I am. I can feel a connection with whatever is going on. And so that quieter piece can also lead to jubilation, but it's more of a flow and an ease and okay, I'm here and I'm whole and I'm aware and I'm open.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Juhi, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I would think about, when I think about joy, I think about it as the opportunity, or as how do I experience it? It's like when I'm joyful, I don't even know it, but weirdly, I start humming Johnny Appleseed to myself.
Oh.
and when I start I just start hearing that in myself. And I think it just means that I am in a moment of appreciation. I'm in a space of appreciation of where I am, the opportunities that I've had and have in front of me. And I think that's a joy for me is like being able to be your full authentic self, right? And embracing that, because I think we are always so guarded and holding, back parts of ourselves. And so if I start humming, because I'm not a hummer, that I'm just in the moment. And I think the importance of that also is that it also is where I find resiliency, right? And I think, again, that is something that when we are tired and not joyful, we don't have. And so the importance of being able to find those times allows us to kind of refill ourselves.
Thank you, all of you, for those comments. I really resonate with what you say, Juhi, in terms of when you're feeling depleted, that accessing that joy. And for me, that access of joy is looking back at photographs of people who I love, my ancestors, to remember that, we've been here before and we've struggled, and there is going to be continued struggle, but like accessing that for me does give me that sense of resilience to be able to move on. So thank you for that.
So I can't help but add a little comment too about the humming, because those of you who know about the vagus nerve,
Yes.
humming is actually a physical practice that can stimulate your vagus nerve, which is the wandering nerve in your body, that when you hum, you're actually giving your brain the signal that you're safe. And it is a way that when your vagus nerve is depleted or dormant, it is a way to actually stimulate it. You can do that through low breathing, but the humming is actually reinforcing the joy physically.
Interesting.
That's really interesting, because I know when I grew up, a lot of the elders, women, they hummed.
Yeah.
They hummed a lot, they hummed, they rocked, they did happy dances. So they just, everything wiggled, and we thought, oh, look at all that fat moving, or their hair wig just fell off. Like, what is going on? But we realized it was spontaneous joy of maybe the memory, or something that happened, or the photographs, all of that. Yes, all of that was what brings us joys. So that was interesting that we're beginning to talk about the practice of joy. We all have our own rituals and practices of joy.
Yes, and we have to access them often. Yeah. Well, tell me about what healing justice means to you and what impact it has. Rebecca, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Healing justice and what it means to me. Healing justice as a term, I think, has now become much more well-known and is read by different people differently. To me, healing justice is a framework by which any kind of movement work, social justice work, actually focuses on wholeness in every individual involved. So the work doesn't move well, and we can't get to where we're trying to go from a place of depletedness, of partitionedness, when we box ourselves away, when we aren't able to have that fullness of ourselves. And that's also the place where it's easier to do harm. And for the healing piece of it, the healing in justice is about that, is about addressing and acknowledging and bringing voice to the fact that we all come with our own wounds, with our histories, with our trauma, and that unless we address that and we make space for the exploration of how are we going to come back to our wholeness, the wholeness of ourselves, then getting to the future that we are trying to build will be very, very difficult because the patterns repeat. So for me, healing justice is all about bringing a focus on wholeness, and that can mean a lot of different things for different spaces. But how do we heal enough to be able to be present, whether it's people healing, systems healing or going away, spaces and communities healing. It's essential in order to actually create a different future.
As a healing justice practitioner, how does that show up in your work?
Oh, goodness, it shows up. It is my work. That is my work. So when I was working with the People's Movement Center, which is no longer, but made a really deep impact in the Twin Cities. We had this wonderful motto, the way in which we moved. It was the healing in justice and the justice in healing. And for me, as a practitioner, it really is the healing in justice. So I was focused on, and continue to be focused on, what is it that you need? What is it that we need? What's going on here? If there is a pattern of pain, that is, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, that is happening, that is present. What is it that is needed to support that healing, and what can we learn from it? So it's all about learning. It's about connecting all the different parts of us, instead of always thinking about your body or your mind, or never thinking about your spirit, and making room. I make room for people to actually explore that and have the questions about, what is it that I really need? Who is it that I really am here to be? What have I maybe lost? What have I put away? What have I been made to put away in order to be successful, or to do life in this society? Because having put those things away, those parts of us away behind closed doors, means that we are always in pain. So opening space to actually have that be acknowledged is really, really important. And then the different ways in which, many ways in which people can heal, can then come in and support in whatever way works for a person or a community. But it's like, let's be human, let's be whole. And we've got a lot of work to do in order to have spaces that truly, truly support that from the get-go.
Thank you for that perspective. I really resonate with the creating space, because I think, like, organizations, as a leader, I ask myself, am I creating space for my colleagues, for the community, to have that kind of an experience? And it's so central, I think, to the work, to the outcome that we want to see. Juhi, I know you wanted to comment.
Yeah, thank you. So I feel like I'm really still just like a student to healing justice and what it is and what it means. So when I think about healing justice, I recall just a lot of moments and instances and interactions I've had as an organizer. We talk to people and we bring people's stories forward, always. And so I access those. And so when I think about healing justice, I think about the work that I do in community development and making equitable communities. And what does that mean? And making a community that allows a person to really thrive, right? I've also worked in the field of health equity and thinking about, how do we redefine health? What's the role of mental health, spiritual health in our communities, and our healing as well. And so I've had privileges to have these conversations with people where, and talking with leaders in the Cambodian community, and talking about where their elders who came here as refugees are in kind of a limbo, right? And that they, came here as refugees to be safe, but always felt that they were going to go home, right? And so they never were willing to accept here as home. And so as they age and as they get older, and they have a level of unsettledness, because they don't have that sense of place. And similarly, when I did placekeeping in St. Paul with Little Mekong, when we had our night markets, one of the most satisfying things that I experienced was when an elder said, looked around at the night market and said, "This feels like home," right? And I'm a little disconnected in this moment, but what I try to do is create through the work I create. I don't know. I mean, that sounds kind of big that I try to do it, but what I really envision for what we do at the Alliance and what I do in my career is creating a sense of connection place, to home, to oneself. Because again, one of the, I was also involved with People's Movement Center and just learned so much from those who founded it. And one of those persons said, we as people are just so disconnected to ourselves, to each other, to our, to the earth, to our built environment. And so I really want to bring that connection back, connection and seeing ourselves and creating beauty. Again, just last story, talking about just beauty in our lives. We talked about our, when I was again with the Asian Economic Development and thinking about health equity, we talked about beautifying our alleys, right? Which seems like such a little thing, but we thought about how do people feel appreciated, right? Coming home, in our communities where we have like just alleys that are ugly and dumping, of garbage in St. Paul, and if we could do something that was beautiful in our alleys, where people actually were happy to come home, feel safe, feel welcome, what a difference that could make, right? And so these little things that we could do, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but.
No, thank you for sharing that story. Actually, I'm going to interject a funny story about when I was in college and my grandparents were still alive, immigrants from Chihuahua, Mexico. And they came to my graduation, and one morning before the graduation, I looked for my grandmother, couldn't find her. And she was outside on her knees. I think she was probably, in her late 70s. And she was planting flowers in the boulevard in front of the apartment that I was renting. And I said, in Spanish, you're like, why are you doing this? And she said, because I want you to feel rooted. I want you to feel connected. And that was really important to her. And so I really hear what you're saying with that. So thank you for the story. Anything that either of you would like to add to that? Healing justice. I mean, there may not have been a formal healing justice practice when you were sort of growing up, Elder Moke, but what do you think?
Well, I think so. I mean,
Is it called that?
I think it's maybe a different perspective of looking at it. I basically have the kind of orphan hero's journey story. So I had to make community. I had to make my own spaces and find my own community. And what I'm learning at this point of my life is I've actually constructed what I call foxholes and pathways for me to navigate a world that has not been kind and continues to be harsh. It's my spiritual practice that I rely upon, and I've also rely upon the communities that I have grown into, that they are helping me with my healing. There's not a person I can't call and say, hey, this is what's happening, and they can come up with a solution as the same as for myself. I'm learning that I am becoming medicine. And my work is helping other people become medicine, because we were all born with a destiny. We were all born with the purpose. We were all born highly valued by the Creator. So all this other stuff is illusion and nonsense. So once we remind each other, we're not learning, we're remembering that we are part of an ecosystem that includes human beings, and we're not always the top of the food chain or the smartest. So we remind each other and talk and have conversations like this that other people are listening to, and they take those conversations out. This is all healing work. This is all spiritual work. Health is a balance of all these elements of ourselves: our physical health, our spiritual health, our emotional health, and our physical health. It all goes together. One's not working, the rest of it is not working as well. So those are the things I have learned, and those are the things I practice, and I do it through art basis. I make spaces for women to come and just make art, women. And I'm learning that most of the people that are coming are healers and activists and philanthropists and entrepreneurs who are our leaders. And the leadership looks different. It's not we're moving from being transactional to being transformative.
That is wonderful. Thank you.
Can't add anything. Nothing.
Well, here's the next question that maybe you can add something to. We'll kick it off with you. There's a growing interest in investing in healing and leaders, of practitioners in the gender and racial justice movement. And so why do you think that's important right now? And what can we do?
So important. So this is, you'll have to get the hook. It's foundational. If we want to talk about any social issue, particularly that philanthropy or government has a vested interest in, that community is telling us they need support, it is the healing from trauma, it is toxic stress, and it is doing that in ways that have meaning in communities. So first, I just want to acknowledge that the clinical mental health system is super important. And there's a lot of things that need to be put into place to make that more robust, more available. Some folks need to be in a clinical therapeutic situation. Some folks need medication. Some folks need hospitalization. All of that is really vital. But we've missed on this opportunity to create a primary prevention approach that teaches human beings their innate power to heal through culturally meaningful ways, right? That may be through meditation, it may be centered prayer, it may be yoga, it may be Tai Chi, it may be ceremony, it may be talking circle, nature, art. There's so many ways. And because it's not a logic model, because it is not a proven academic, evidence-based set of practices, there's certainly a lot of evidence that these practices work, but we don't have a framework that fits into the silos that our systems so often look to say, what are the outcomes that we can expect from this? You cannot truly identify outcomes from primary prevention to say this worked. Like, how do you know that because of that intervention with those ladies that you had at Yo Mama, that one of those moms did not fall into despair, was able to stay whole, connected to her people, raise her children beautifully? How can you prove that? You can't. So we have to stop insisting that we have measurable outcomes for everything, because if that is the way we're going to do our work, why are we in this mess, right? So the investment, philanthropy has a huge opportunity. We know that clinical systems are going to be a little bit slower to come around to billing. We do need to have billing structures that support cultural healing, community healing, but we also know that that's going to take a little bit of time. So philanthropy can lead in this space. So it's so important to invest in the healing practices that the community says, these are what we need. They're developed by the community in their own languages, in their own faith histories, and their own value systems, not adapted from somebody else's model, right? You can learn a lot from other models. So this is where philanthropy can be innovative. They can be truly responsive to what the community is telling us. And the community has been telling this for years. We need support to heal from the wounds of ancestral trauma, from vicarious trauma, from toxic stress. And we need to have the freedom to experiment, to fail, to iterate, to learn from, and then deepen our work. That takes risk on the part of philanthropy, but it is imperative that we do it. And some funders are getting there. I'm thrilled that the Women's Foundation of Minnesota is going to start investing in this space. It is so important. There are other funders who are coming into that space, some who have already been here, the George Family Foundation, big shout out to them. But we need more investment. We need government systems, we need clinical systems, and we need more philanthropy to invest in the healing work for many, many reasons. I think there's a question coming later about why, so I'll hold off on that. But that's sort of my my spiel for now.
Yeah, thank you so
I'm
much.
a little passionate about this.
Yes.
Well, and it's a values shift, a
Yeah.
values and priorities
Yeah.
shift.
Mhm.
So for philanthropy to do this, they have to shift where they find value. What is the value in helping to support communities in doing what they're saying that they need and getting what we're saying that we need, versus this is what Western medicine says, or this is what the research and academia area says is valid. And so what lead are you taking? And of course, this comes from the deep history of uprooting indigenous cultures and cutting off our roots and making sure that the scientific systems and knowledge did not continue at the ways that our ancestors stayed healthy and then also healed, that didn't get passed along to us. It's intentional. So the shift then also needs to be intentional. The shift back to acknowledging that there is nothing new about yoga. that we're discovering now. It's not a new westernized practice. There's nothing new about meditation. You know, these things come from generations and generations and generations before us. Will we then acknowledge what has occurred and say, we're gonna press the restart button and listen and value the deep history and knowledge and wisdom that our communities hold.
Yes.
We live with it, we walk with it. So is that the priority?
That is an important value for the Women's Foundation, is to center solutions in community and investing in their solutions for how they are going to thrive and heal. So Juhi, did you want to add to that in terms of?
Well, you know, again, from the community development perspective, you know, I think about community development and the field as it started was really investing in the community, the people, right? And it's evolved into this, you know, industry around housing and maybe, you know, small businesses and you know, I'm sure it was needed, but at the same time, we need to bring that merger back into, you know, what community development is and does. So it can still be housing, it can still be creating, you know, cultural corridors, and because those are needed. But then how are they also, you know, working to heal people? How are they working to make the communities inclusive? How are they making communities safer, right? And so it kind of goes back to that beautification. It comes back to what type of art is it? What green spaces are there? I learned this concept from Innovations District of like spontaneous collisions, right? Where instead of isolation, creating spaces that allow people to, you know, just have their personal space, you create spaces that force people to collide, right? And, you know, might be uncomfortable, but it's the long table at a restaurant that everybody has to sit at, you know, or it is, you know, people, like when I went to Korea and crossed the street in Seoul, there were like 200 people at an intersection every time they waited, you know, to cross, right? And so creating these different ways to get people to just meet for unknown reasons breaks down that isolation.
It's not very Minnesotan.
It's not Minnesota.
Well, yeah.
We definitely have to create some new systems to make that happen. I don't think any of us want worse traffic. Well, one of the things that we talk about at the Women's Foundation is narrative and the importance of changing narrative about problems and solutions, right? As I was just saying, centering the people most impacted by inequities is something that we want to do. And so I'm curious about the untold story that exists about centering joy and healing for women and girls. What is that untold story, do you think? And how do we make that shift so that more people know the importance and value of it?
I think we are looking at, we kind of back this down. I'm going to go back to my first thought. My first thought was COVID was a fierce teacher.
Yes.
And what happened after that and with George Floyd was a significant teaching lesson. And we are significantly as a whole in deep grief. Some of us are in deep sorrow. And it was eye-opening for these two components, these two phenomena to happen within months of each other, and how people have learned and have not learned what is going on. I am going for those who are learning and asking and seeking and wanting to do something better. We know resources help people not get engaged. It's a way of, oh, I can go take a trip, I can go get some more liquor, I can go buy some more clothes. It's a whole lot different than the person who cannot go and use the resources that way. They have to use it for daily things. So I'm hoping things are shifting because of that. But I'm also hoping that when we look at this, that we're looking and listening as well. I have talked to more people in the last 2 years, I think in my entire 72. I have talked to people on the street. They just need to talk. I have washed my hands in a bathroom when a woman has turned around and told me her whole life story. It is the time for us to listen because everybody needs to be heard and be seen at this point. Centering Black girls and Black women is essential because we're the first responders. We are the essential workers. We are the Go to Courage Center, and then it's a Black body pushing a white body that's affirmed. It's us picking up everything that could possibly take to hold this glue together. We're tired of being the glue. We now need to be more and wholer. So focusing on Black girls and women, it's our due time. It's more than our due time. It is necessary. Every movement has been built upon the backs of basically Black women. So even the civil rights movement was based on it. It just got shifted to let's do this movement for the whole, as opposed to the movement was basically based on the rape of Recy Taylor and the journalism of Rosa Parks to talk about how white men were raping Black women and what to do about it. And we made it a bigger issue. But we also had there's a lot of pain there. It's a lot of pain and sorrow that issue was still the Me Too movement or half of the Me Too movement. So when we look at history, when we look at what is presented to us, we can get freaked out about the traumas and it looks like it's building and building and building and building. But we have the know to. Every community knows how to heal itself. My understanding, I might be wrong, but Rebecca helped me out on here, that even in your front yard, you have all the medicines, the plants, the animals, everything you need to heal. You may not recognize it. So you ask someone else, I feel like I need to cleanse. I feel like I need to sleep for 10 hours. Somebody has that answer. You remember when they used to, how they used to soothe babies. Somebody has that answer. Why were the old people always doing this or rocking their feet? Now, everybody, I don't know if anybody else has noticed, everybody like in America shaking that leg now. We got the stank leg going now for like, everybody got this going on. What does that mean? So we have the clues, we have the energy, we have the notices. We've got the assignments. We just got to say, do I want that hybrid car or do I want to be healthy? Make a decision. Make a decision. And that's where we get caught up in a lot of talking and making up words and things. We know how to do this. It doesn't matter if this is called a cup or this is called a mesa, the table. We need to start finding out how do we do this. And I think that's what's important for me right now is, yes, put people that look like me on top if you can. It doesn't mean that we're always going to be there, but right this now, we are suffering.
Yes.
It's a lot of suffering. We need to stop making people suffer because they'll check out and that becomes more harm. Yeah. I think we got the narcoleptic dragging the narcissistic now. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy now.
Thank you for sharing that. And your comment causes me to think, is it possible to have joy in the midst of sorrow?
Yes.
And
yes. Yes. Some of us have got to laughing and we've got a real practice of laughing and crying at the same time.
And that's important back to the resilience, right?
Yeah.
So if people are feeling that they can't or feeling that they should be ashamed of feeling joyful or seeking joy in such difficult times, we should really give each other permission and support each other. So that we can find joy in the midst of these times.
Right, and that's usually with family, the laughter of family as you do duties, if you do jobs, Saturday morning getting your hair did, and everybody was in the kitchen cooking and baking and washing and everything. And there was, it was craziness. Kids wanted to go outside and not do the chores. Adults wanted to get the kids away and all kinds of things were going on. But we managed to find joy in that chaos.
Yes.
We managed to find joy. We managed to find ways of how to do other things easier. We learned how to tote things for other people, help carry things. Those are the conversations I think they're being had. But I think it's a problem when if they don't get commodified, it doesn't become like, oh, the next wave thing, the mindfulness. I'm gonna be mindfulness and the rest of you don't come. There used to be a thing in the 60s, free your mind and your behind would follow. I think we need to revisit a few things.
Okay. Right.
The Yoruba say the head carries the body and not the feet.
Mhm.
So I think it's the same thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we have what we need, like you were saying.
Mhm.
And we need time and space, and we need trust and practice. I think if we go back to centering joy and well-being for girls and women, we're out of practice.
Yes, if we think about the pandemic, women and girls were at the center of families
Mhm.
and the stress. And we heard that a lot from community
And even before the pandemic.
Before that, yeah.
before the pandemic.
So
Exactly.
and it just got concentrated in this really intense period, right? Which kind of has let up, but not really, because things are different in a way that I think just a lot of things have just become more visible. But so this one of the untold stories, I'm sure there are many untold
Yes.
things, stories about this, but one of them that comes to mind for me is that we're going to need that practice, and we'll need to be able to create spaces where we can rest enough to get to the point of saying, okay, what does joy feel like? How can I access this in my family, in myself, in my community? It's going to take time, and the work that I do to support individuals and groups, there's oftentimes a barrier, especially with communities of color. There's this barrier to even considering a joy practice or seeking joy or finding time. It seems luxurious, but it also seems scary, because if I go into that is not a space where I have found safety necessarily. That's not the place that society has told me is for me. It's always joy with an asterisk of watch your back, you know? So I think that with a focus on this, we're really going to need to take the time to create spaces to support the practice of rest and joy for a period of time. It's a long time that we haven't had it.
That's
So it's
right.
going to take some time
That's right.
to get into the practice where it feels like, oh yeah, I know my joy. I've got it. I know how I access it. I know how to feel it, because oftentimes it can feel too scary to even go there.
And that's part why we need to support each other doing that. What does
That's
it
right.
look like? And it can be different for different people,
That's right.
but to trust our intuition and help each other in that.
Exactly.
Juhi, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, it makes me think about the fact that, the resourcing it in ourselves, that we have the answers in ourselves, right? And it makes me think about the fact that, we are, for the most part, most people here have been displaced, especially people of color, right? The reason we're here is out of a level of forced displacement, whether it be slavery. I'm here out of adoption, and the Cold War. Native people have been moved around, and so to the idea of being whole, the idea of again having that sense of home, that safety and peace, is so foreign and it's so deep inside of what it is, where we're from, that those inherent knowledge that we have from generations is so buried in us, and we are forced to conform, we are forced to assimilate, we are so much has been stripped from us. And I think the work that Rebecca does is so beautiful. Like, I've gone to her to try to resource and access these things myself, and but I think that idea of like creating space for practice is so important, because it is so deep and so so messed up. I mean, I say messed up, but I don't mean it in a bad way, but it is, right? It's so messed up how it is so very deep inside of us. And so I think that the healing is being able to find, that depth of history in ourselves, And again, just finding that sense of wholeness that we need.
I know we have questions probably coming in from Facebook, but let me just ask about how we can better resource, healing work, and as individuals and people within systems, like what recommendations would you have about how we can infuse healing into our lives as individuals, and then into our organizations or the systems that we're operating in?
It needs to happen on so many levels. And the opportunities are right before us. So I just spent 6 months doing a statewide landscaping project to understand what does an ecosystem of community well-being look like in Minnesota.
Mm.
And what I heard from all over the state was a couple of levels. One is that many people just don't even know that wellness and wholeness, tending to their wholeness, can mean a clinical therapeutic intervention, or it can mean other ways of healing. Like, what are those other opportunities? What are my choices? What can I do without being in a therapist's office? Because I'm not going to go because I don't have the right insurance, or they don't look like me, or I don't want to be pathologized, or I don't trust them, or whatever, if I'm not getting the help that I need. So introducing concepts, yoga, acupuncture, introducing these practices that people can understand, they can utilize to help themselves feel centered, to move through their pain, to get out of their survival brain where all their heightened emotions are ruling, where you cannot be strategic, right? You cannot be strategic if you're being driven by fear or rage. And so introducing these concepts and educating people about opportunities that exist, but then supporting the seeding and experimenting in communities that are saying, we know we need to do this, but we're not exactly sure what it looks like. So we need to try this, we need to try that. We need to bring in Rebecca, we need to bring in the native healers, we need to bring in different practices, and we need to find the ways within our organizations, whether that's a school system or a nonprofit or a healthcare system, find the ways within our organization that we can make this work. And then there's work that is already taking place. The ecosystem exists, but it needs to be scaled. Like, where's the work happening that's already proven that it is working well? Invest in those places and those people that are already taking this to the next level, and making sure that they have the support that they need to demonstrate efficacy and to scale it out. And finally, how do we build this into systems like community health workers, like the family and children's collaboratives around the state? We have these structures that, like the Alliance, there are structural places where embedding healing work can just radiate out, and it will have a multiplier effect. So there are ways to do this, and some of it is already taking place. And I've probably said too much now.
No, that is wonderful.
Teach.
When I think about our homeless population, unhoused folks, it would be really helpful to have that kind of a practice and approach to dealing with the unhoused. It's not just about building more affordable housing. Yes, we need more affordable housing, but that's not the only answer.
Mhm.
And we need to be really careful that we're not just starting to use concepts as an excuse. Oh, we taught you some resilience practices. You should be okay now.
Right.
Why can't you keep that apartment? Why can't you stay off those drugs? Like, that's not what needs to happen. But to begin to introduce the concepts and the practices, support them, norm them by investing in the leadership, organizational leaders who are doing the work. They have a golden opportunity to scale it within their organizations. And to understand that for women particularly, then this is the untold story that I want to share, is that we have this idea that we can't take care of ourselves because there's too many people that rely on us. And so it seems selfish. It seems like we don't deserve it somehow because my kids, my spouse, my parents, my community, my staff, everybody needs me to be the strong one. And that's great. But if you are depleted, if you are not at your best self, then you are not helpful. You cannot be the powerful change agent that the world needs you to be if you're not in your whole best self.
So maybe as a philanthropist, one of the questions we should ask our grantee partners is, what are you doing to care for yourself? As opposed to, what are you doing to demonstrate XYZ?
I think a hidden story, also a hidden narrative, is well, my first thing was to approach these issues and these challenges as not, it's a problem, what happened?
Mhm.
What happened to you? What happened here?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening here? Because usually what happened, it's still happening. So those are the questions. My next thing is on a personal level is the practice of becoming self-reflective. I will ask myself, if I catch myself saying I should have did something, oh, I don't want to should on myself. So I'm gonna reframe whatever was in my head, and I'm going to say, that's an external voice, that's not mine. So what is my voice in this? I'm gonna say another hidden narrative that I don't ever hear many people talk about is their religious practice. If it's still steeped in control and colonialism and empirical welfare or oppressive stuff, your spiritual practice should be liberating. It should not be confining and yoking you to some crazy stuff. So I look at those things as a practice as what are the hidden narratives? Women, specifically Black women, are told they're lazy if they're not working 24/7, 365 days a week. We're told that we're not valued unless we're saving everybody in the world, and even though we're on fire. So we have to start looking at what is it that we participate in. Like I've asked people, well, how do we all participate in Minnesota Nice? Because Minnesota Nice can't exist without somebody else. It's got to have all these partners to dance with.
That's right.
It's the same thing about healing. We have partners to dance with. We're going to get that club-footed one. We're going to stand on our feet. Or we're gonna get that one that let us dance barefoot and twirls us around like we feel like spontaneous joy because we feel like Tinkerbell or somebody while we're spinning.
Yes,
We've
please.
got to make those decisions, and those are personal and they're systemic.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that. Well, before I close, I want to just ask, is there anything about the work that you're doing that you would like our community to know about the healing justice work that you're leading? How can we support you? I mean, it's International Women's Day. Thank you for giving your time to be here and to elevate the conversation with us. And we want to support you, not just today, but going forward. So how can our Minnesota community that's listening in be of support to you in the work that you're leading?
Continue to hold these platforms, continue to bring the visibility to the need and the solutions that are right before us, because this is an emergent field. We don't really have, I mean, we're clearing the path as we walk it.
Yes.
Essentially, this is new. This is a movement of people who are beginning to recognize that healing justice is not just a luxury. It is not an afterthought. It is foundational to our capacity to be strategic warriors for peace. It is foundational to our relationships. It is foundational to our capacity to end violence. This is human dynamics. It's not something that needs to be put into a binary. It is our human nature, human central nervous systems. And so continuing to give visibility and voice to this work, I think,
Thank you.
what's needed.
Yeah.
Well, I think Your Mama's House, Your Mama, the Art of Mothering, basic mission is to bring women back into a higher level of esteem, to look at our visible and our invisible labor as mattered and needed and necessary, and hold that in high esteem, but also to be creative and innovative and to continue to express ourselves as much as we can for all women, but really elevate the voices of women as mothers. That's my biggest thing. Stay tuned for, you can go to Your Mama's House or Google me online, Amake Kubat, but stay tuned, and I'm going to have 3 elder programs starting this year. And I'm very, very excited. The Elders Disco, daytime disco is coming.
I love that.
Ooh.
Over 55 qualifies as elder.
Well, you buy if
Baby
you're
elder.
not, you're,
Baby elder.
you're a baby elder, you have to bring an elder.
Thank you.
We gotta get the elders out of isolation.
Amen. That's right. Thank you. Juhi, how about you?
I would say that just be mindful that healing justice is not a one-off, is not something that happens in isolation. Like you don't do healing justice here and then, you know, health equity there, or environmental justice. It all has to work together for us to be able to thrive. Mhm.
Thank you. Great reminder.
Yeah.
Yes.
So right now I'm working with a beautiful growing group of people to create and build a land sanctuary up near the North Shore in Minnesota called Maji Yachai Land Sanctuary, which comes from my people in Tanzania. And we're really focusing being and not doing. And it's going to be a space that is centering rest and joy and thriving for communities of color and all of our communities. And so it's in progress, but I would say that the practice of focusing on connecting with the earth, connecting with spaces outside of concrete buildings and cities and rest is something that I hope can be talked about and practiced more, and that we as our organization, Maji Yachai Land Sanctuary, can help people to really start doing it in a deeper way right now. So I also have a stay tuned. Majiyachai.org is our website, and we are building so that communities can come up, individuals, families across generations can come and be with the trees and be with the water. And be with each other. And it's really blessed work.
That's a beautiful vision and invitation for us to be part of it.
Yes.
And we need spaces and places to be in connection with each other and to have spontaneous conversations when we're washing our hands or standing on a street corner or in the grocery store, to really connect and see each other. And I think that has been central to the joy that I have received from being with all of you today. And so thank you so much. I don't know if we have any other questions from our folks online, but I'm just going to wrap it up by saying, again, thank you for the care that each of you demonstrate through the work that you do and for making time for this conversation. We know that the work of self-care and collective care is not easy, and we really appreciate the work that you do and give voice to. For all of you who are joining us virtually, thank you for being part of this conversation and for lending your attention and your questions. This topic is so relevant to all of our lives and our futures, and it'll continue to be a focus of the work of the foundation. And so we're going to continue to have these conversations in community. The recording will be shared along with links to the resources that our panelists have shared today. And we'd love to hear from you. So please put in the chat your contact information if you have a question, if there's something that you're curious about, something that you didn't understand or you want to know more about, something that made you smile, that brought you joy, please add that to the chat. We want to hear from you. And so if you'd like to know more about the Women's Foundation, there will be a link put in the chat for you as well. And so in closing, I'll just say, in honor of International Women's Day, do someone a favor, do a special woman a favor by thanking her for being in your life, by lifting up gratitude to your elder, and think about the future generation and the world that we are working to create for a generation that we will not see. And make sure that you express joy as you leave today. So thank you. And thank you to the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bravo.